This is Heresy, the miniature wargaming talk show. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to equip your Warhound Titans in Legions Imperialis. We're going to be talking about using Warhound Titans in general, so that we can then talk about every Warhound Titan weapon and how to get the most out of them, which ones are the best. We're going to do a little Warhound weapon tier list to give you a bit of an idea of what compares to what and how, and then we're going to have a look at some suggested loadouts as well. Before we do that, if you do enjoy the show, please do like and subscribe. During the video, please do leave me a comment on anything you think you'd like to have a quick chat about. And also as well, don't forget to join us on Discord. The link to that is in the video description below. And now on with the show. So first of all, let's talk about a few basics about Warhound Titans so we can contextualize the weapons that we're going to talk about. So Warhound Titans aren't super survival for their points. They're 330 points, they've only got 4 wounds and 2 void shields. The void shields can regenerate, but the likelihood is your opponent's probably going to try to take the Warhound out in one turn, which isn't too hard to do. They're also not that maneuverable, so as a Titan, they do have to do 90-degree turns when they move. So they get 2 because they're agile, because they're a Warhound, but that's still not maneuverable compared to most things in the game. They're quite easy to flank, especially if you try to first fire with them, which is quite important. Your opponent can just move past them if they've gone on an advance order, and if they haven't gone on an advance order, they might be trying to shoot and kill your Warhound before it gets to do anything. So you've got to be quite careful with Warhounds, especially when they get close. Now, as a Titan, you can split fire, so mixing weapon options is okay. Completely viable option to mix weapons. One great thing about Titans is they can destroy buildings by walking into them, and that's kind of free, because they can shoot their weapons as well. So if you haven't got your Titans walking into buildings and smashing them up, you're kind of missing out on some of their power. On the flip side though, getting close can be quite dangerous. As I've said, Warhounds aren't that survivable. And if your opponent just shoots everything at the Titan, it's not that hard to kill it. So it's got the benefits to being there up close, but it can also be pretty dangerous. So we've got to make sure that we balance that. Warhound Titans are 330 points, which is quite expensive, but not too expensive. Because you can only spend 30% of your points on Titans, it means that in theory you can take them in a 1250 point game, probably 1500 points, but you can't take them in 1000. So they're the Titan for smaller point games, really. Or you can take multiple and larger point games. Almost every gun on a Warhound is front arc only, because of the way their arms work. They don't really have many joints. And they move 7 inches, and as I mentioned before, they're agile, so they can make 2 turns. So agile in the context of a Titan is not the same as being actually agile on the battlefield, though, so they are still a bit hard to move around. 4 wounds and 2 void shields makes them not that survivable. They do have a close assault factor of 10, which is huge as well, so if you can get them into combat, they will mulch stuff up. They can just stomp on a bunch of vehicles or whatever else you need them to do, but also it's quite dangerous when they get there. So let's have a look at their weapons. So we'll start with the Vulcan Mega Bolter. This is a classic weapon from days gone by. 22-inch range, which is the same as las cannons on most vehicles, so standard vehicle long range. 10 dice, 5+ to hit, 1 AP. It's light AT, rapid fire, which means that on average it gets half a hit per dice, so it's almost exactly the same as having a 4+ to hit in terms of averages. Obviously it can spike. And it's got shield bane as well, so if you are shooting this at an enemy Titan, it's easy to strip void shields with. An excellent weapon versus most targets just because of the volume of shots it's got. Gets a bit ineffective at things that have got a 2+ save, but things that have got a 3+ or worse, pretty good. It's dangerous range to be in though. As I've said, las cannons are 22-inch range, so most vehicles can shoot you at the point when your Vulcan Mega Bolter's in range. So it's a toss-up whether you think this is worth the risk going off for your Warhound. On the flip side, you can also take Swarmer missiles. So these are basically the same gun, except a 35-inch range, but only 8 dice. So you trade off a couple of dice to be a lot safer against enemy fire. Now, I really like these. You may or may not like that trade-off in dice versus range, but I think they're a great choice if you still want to maintain that high shot count, but you want to stay safe or reach targets that are a little bit further away. We are getting into the territory with that gun of maybe being a little bit weak, just slightly, for the points you're paying for the Titan, but I do think these are a great option as well. The Turbo Laser Destructor is another weapon that I think we'll see quite a lot on Warhound Titans, so it's got a 40-inch range, which is massive, 2 dice, 4+ to hit, 3 AP, and it's accurate. Just really great stats all round. You know, it's very reliable, good range, it can hurt any target, it's not anti-tank. although you wouldn't kill many infantry stands with 2 dice. And that's its main problem. It's only got 2 dice. So even though it's got a good chance of hitting with them and possibly killing, whatever it's shooting because of its good AP, it does only have a limited top end. So it's a good weapon. I do think we see it a lot. It's a sort of a standard anti-tank weapon or anti-high armor weapon for the Warhound. It'll be quite common. There's also the plasma blast gun. Now I put this next to the turbo laser destructor just to contrast the two. This is a 3+ to hit instead of a 4+ on accurate, which is worse. 4+ accurate is a 75% chance to hit. A 3+ is a 66% chance to hit. And this has got 20-inch range, literally half the range as well. This gun has no reason to exist, and this is some really, really poor rules writing. Something I find very commonly happens in a lot of Games Workshop games is they fail to understand somehow the basic value of a reroll, just making this weapon a ton better. Plasma Blast Gun is a weapon you should never equip. You should always equip something else. Turbo Laser Destructor being its most common thing that's closest to it. There is a I'm going to say this for sake of completeness, if you've got -2 to hit, the Turbo Laser Destructor hits about 30% chance and the Plasma Blast Gun hits 33%. So if you're really, really sold on getting -2 to hit and having 3% higher chance to hit, you could argue the Plasma Blast Gun's better in that situation. You would be crazy to do so, but there you go. That's the only thing it's better at, so never touch this gun. Unfortunately, all my Titans I've already got painted, I've all got Plasma, and this is a problem on every Titan, not just the Warhound. So hopefully Games Workshop might do something about this, but until then, leave this one at home. The Inferno Gun's a really cool weapon. So it's got a template, Flamer template, a hit on a 4+. So everything fully under the template, you hit on a 4. Everything partially under the template, you need to roll a 4. And then you roll a 4 again, basically against a detachment. And it's got 2 AP, Light AT, Firestorm, which is the template rule effectively, and Shield Bane. Firestorm also means that you ignore cover, hit modifiers, and cover saves innately as well. This is a really good anti-infantry weapon. When infantry in a structure, they count the structure as being their whole base. So if you can cover the structure with the Inferno Gun, which you probably can, it's an auto hit against every single infantry stand in the building. And this also isn't bad against things like Dreadnoughts or even tanks. If you get larger formations of things like Lehman Russes, you can probably get quite a few hits out of this as well. So it's a really powerful weapon for clearing structures. It's an okay weapon in other circumstances as well. Its problem is obviously short range. As we've said, the Warhound isn't too survivable. And this is really a trade-off. If you want to get close and do a lot of damage, this is a good gun. But if you want to keep your Warhound safe, or if you think you're going to be playing against someone with lots of anti-tank, this would put you in a very risky position. The Incisor Melter Lance has got a 14-inch range at base, 1 dice, 4+ to hit, 3 AP. It's accurate, it's got anti-tank and Demolisher. Now, Demolisher is a super coveted, not very common and great rule for weapons to have in Imperialis, so you definitely want to have access to some of this. If you get to 6-inch range, we get another +1 to hit, another 1 AP, and we also get Engine Killer 2, so we start doing 2 damage to things, which normally is enough to kill most things like a Kratos or a Baneblade or something like that as well, so it's quite a powerful shot. Demolisher's really nice, but it's only going to do 1 damage when you shoot with this gun. Engine Killer doesn't do anything against structures either, which makes it a little bit of a shame. Overall, although this gun's quite accurate and has got a great AP, it's a pretty low output for a Titan weapon. Even when you get within 6 inches, it's still a 3+ to hit, which you can easily fail. You're going to fail a third of the time. Things might save on a 6 sometimes as well. It's just not that high output for a Titan weapon, so this isn't really a great weapon for me. It's certainly usable. It's nice to have Demolisher. It's just not very powerful as a Demolisher weapon or as an anti-tank weapon. So this one, unfortunately, again for me, the other weapon I've got painted the most on my Titans is Melter Weapons, and this is the one I'm going to be leaving at home too. The Volkite Eradicator is a pretty cool weapon, so it's got a 16-inch range. It rolls 3 dice, 4+ to hit and 2 AP. Now it's got the beam rule, so we're measuring a line from the Titan of 16 inches, and everything that we cross, as long as we don't hit a building or something like that, is going to get hit with the same hits. It's got Deflagrate, it's Light AT, and Shield Bane. So, at its base level, if it just hits 1 enemy detachment, it's not a terrible gun. it's okay. You're probably going to get one extra dice off Deflagrate, maybe, unless you spike. So you could sort of consider this 4 dice, 4 plus -2. That's not bad in the context of other Warhound weapons. But if you do get to hit 2 enemies with it, all of a sudden, I think it's really, really great. You know, you're doing pretty good stuff with it. It's a good weapon. If you manage to hit 3, it's fantastic. It's probably the best Warhound weapon at that point. So 16 inches is quite short. Again, quite dangerous for the Warhound. But this could be quite an excellent weapon if you're happy to get into a good position with it, if you're willing to take those risks, you know, if you're willing to work with other things in your army. This could be really good. And I think you could put your opponent in some interesting situations where they're trying to avoid getting a whole bunch of the detachments beamed, particularly if they're trying to stack up around an objective. So a pretty good gun, this. And lots of people really like painting Volkite stuff as well, just because it's a cool painting opportunity. So is Plasma, but the Plasma guns are really bad. So this is nice for people who enjoy nice, glowy, painty things, that this has actually got some good stats for a change. Shudder missiles are an interesting weapon. So the 35-inch range, 2 dice, 4 plus to hit, 1 AP, barrage, and quake. You give up a lot of stats on this weapon, obviously, to get the quake ability, which gives people -1 to hit on the shots from the detachment that you hit. And also, as well, means they halve their movement until the end of the round, which is kind of a weird rule in Imperialis, because by the time you fire this almost all the time, the movement phase is already gone, and it only lasts until the end of the round. So, just not that good a rule, Quake, I don't think. I think that the Quake weapons, you know, we'll see this in future episodes when we talk about things like the Quake cannon as well, give up a lot of stats for the Quake rule, and it just doesn't seem very good to me, unfortunately. So, I'd love to hear if anyone thinks they've got a super duper clever use for this that I haven't thought of, but I'm pretty sure, unfortunately, Quake weapons just aren't very good in this rule set, and for that reason I don't think Shudder missiles are very good. And we got the Ursa's Claw, which is a super cool weapon, 6-inch range, 1 dice, 4 plus to hit. It's got Impale, and it's one of the few weapons on the Warhound with a 360-degree arc of fire as well. Impale basically rolls off against an enemy, adding your scale, and you know, roll them, and they add their scale, and they take the difference in wounds. They don't get a save, but it only affects enemy models with a scale of 3 or more, so super heavy tanks or bigger, and it only hits on a 4+. A lot of the time, the only target you'll have for this will be enemy Titans, which are bigger than you as well, so we're going to roll off higher than you on the scale roll. It's just a really poorly statted weapon, this, really. You need a 4+ to hit, then you've got to win a roll off, and you've got to get within 6 inches to use it. It's just not very good. And it's a shame because Ursa's Claws are quite cool, and a lot of people, you know, like them from reading about them in the books and all this kind of stuff. They really needed to do a lot more. If you're going to get into that range, they needed to do a lot more damage. They needed to be capable of really hurting those bigger Titans like they do in the fluff as well. Ursa's Claw, unfortunately, want to leave at home. Natrix Shock Lance is in a similar position, so again, another 6-inch 360 arc weapon. Only needs a 2+ to hit, 1 AP. It's got bypass, so it goes through void shields, and it's got Shock Pulse. Shock Pulse means that enemy super heavies that you hit with it can only shoot 1 weapon in the turn instead of more weapons. So that could be really debilitating against an enemy Titan. The problem with it is if they fire before you, then it's obviously going to have no effect. And because it's only a 6-inch range, and because you're only a little Warhound, if you go on first fire, it's very easy for the enemy to just walk out of range of this. Even though you have got a 360 arc, they can just walk away. Or if you don't go on first fire and they do, they shoot before you, etc. It's just not a very good debuff given the constraints around actually getting to use the weapon. And for that reason, unfortunately, I don't think the Natrix Shock Lance is very good. The Graviton Eradicator fires 30 inches, 2 dice, 2 AP, and it's got Demolisher and Graviton Pulse. Graviton Pulse means that your to hit number is equal to the save and throw of the enemy target. So, it's not a great gun if you're just shooting at a tank. If you're shooting at something with a 2+ save, you're going to hit it on a 2, but it'll save on a 4, which isn't great, and only 2 shots. It has got a decent range, though. Its stats are just okay. It can hit anything, it's not anti-tank, so that's alright. But what it's amazing against, and its real main purpose, is buildings. When you hit a building, you hit on a 3+ flat, and then the building has to make a save. Now, buildings save on 2d6, and you've only got 2 AP. And in the case of Graviton Pulse, you actually want them to pass the save, which is a kind of weird rule, but, you know, gravity reversed, etc. So most buildings have got a 4+ or a 5+ save. at worst, or a 2+ save, some of them at best, and you've only got 2 AP. So on 2 dice, all buildings will pass on average the save against you. So you're going to roll 2 dice, hitting on 3s. They're going to pass their save most of the time, and if you hit them through that inverse save, they take D3 plus 1 structure points. Most buildings have only got 2 structure points. So what all that comes out to is against the most common building types, the Graviton Eradicator kills them. Even on a low roll, a Graviton Eradicator will kill them. Against bigger buildings, if you play with them in your games, it's still got a good chance of killing bigger buildings even. Probably the best weapon in the game for destroying buildings. Factor in cost, obviously the Warlord version of this is a bit better, but the Warlord Titan's twice as many points, and the gun doesn't really need to be any better than this to one-shot a building, so just a fantastic weapon. Demolisher just a great thing as well, especially for Marines who've got less access to it than Solar Auxilia 2. Really good gun, this. The Conversion Beam Dissolutor is a conversion beam, so if you played any Games Workshop games, you know that these are better the further away you are. So 6 to 35 inch range, rolls 2 dice, 4-3-2, and -2-3-4 AP and Demolisher. Doesn't have the beam rule, was the first thing that really confused me. I mean, it'd be too good with these stats if it did, but I kind of expected that they would stat this to have the beam rule. Or I guess that just is what it is. So the range bands for this are 6 inches, 6 to 18, and 18 to 35. It's really not hard to stay out of 18 inches if you want to, but even if you are in 18 inches, the middle profile on this is actually decent. 2 dice, 3s to hit, 3 AP. Pretty solid stats as weapons on the Warhound go. But it's got Demolisher, so it's got a reasonable chance of one shot on a 2 hit point building. It's got a good save modifier. 2 shots, decent to hit. That middle line even will hit on a 2 because you get +1 to hit buildings. I think this is a good all-round weapon. So most Demolisher weapons give up quite a lot. We saw the Melter Lance before, not great stats for Demolisher. Demolisher cannons themselves are, short range, 4+ to hit, 3 AP, only 1 shot. They can hurt buildings, they're not amazing at it because buildings save on 2 dice. This is a pretty great gun, and if you're not shooting at buildings, it's also got good stats as well. I really like these. I think it's a great all-round. It gives you that Demolisher capability while still retaining the ability to hurt other targets as well. So summing up all these weapons into a tier list, where do I think they sit? Well, I think the Graviton Eradicator, Conversion Beam Dissolutor are both just fantastic weapons. Demolisher capability. One, the ultimate Demolisher. The other, really good and still staying good at everything else. The Vulcan Megabolter and Swarmer missiles, I think, are really good weapons. A lot of shots. Good against lots of different targets. And the Inferno gun, the same. I think it's quite a dangerous weapon to use, but the possible payoff for using it is really, really good. In the B tier, we've got Turbo Laser Destructor. So the Turbo Laser Destructor is a pretty good gun, but it's got a pretty low top end. And for a 330 point Titan, it's probably, I would rather go with something like a Vulcan Megabolter and have a much higher potential out of it. Volkite Eradicator, the same. I think it's got really good potential. It can go very high. It can also be pretty mediocre, and it's got quite a short range as well, so it's got a bit of both, but it is good enough, even at its base level, to be in this B tier. C tier is where we get into weapons that, I probably wouldn't use. Personally, the Melter Lance is the only thing in there. It's okay. It's not the worst weapon in the world, and it does bring that Demolisher capability. It's just also not great either. The other weapons are just better. In the D tier, we've got the Ursus Claw, the Natrix Shock Lance, and Shudder Missiles. All of these are pretty bad weapons, like they're actively bad weapons. If you want to take them for cool factor, that's probably the only reason you'd use these. Or maybe if Quake gets changed somehow, you'd use the Shudder Missiles. But outside of that, I don't think these see play. And then all the way down, suddenly jumping into the F tier as a Plasma Blast gun. Absolutely no reason to use this gun. Certainly needs a rewrite in rules. You'll notice I put no S tier in this list, so there is nothing that is so super standout. You're going to see it on absolutely every Titan. And it's pretty cool, as a rule. We've got 5 weapons in the A tier, 2 in the B. Most of the guns are up there in being usable, which is quite cool when you're thinking about loadouts for your Warhound or you fancy some variety. Just a shame some of the others didn't get slightly better rules. So what does this mean for suggested loadouts then? Well, there's obviously a lot of things you can do, and this is just a few of my favourites, things that I think could really work well. There's other stuff you can do too, though, if you want to put some of those A and B tier weapons together particularly. I think 1 Graviton Eradicator, plus either Turbo Laser Destructor or Swarm Missiles is pretty good. So you could take 2 Graviton Eradicators, but one of them is enough to blow a building up on its own most of the time. So we also bring another gun with a similar range to the Eradicator so we can keep the Warhounds safe. That lets us either shoot at tanks or just gives us the Swarm missiles, good firepower against whatever. Also, I think Turbo Laser Destructor plus one of the more anti-light stuff weapons, Swarm Missiles or Vulcan Mega Bolter, depending on how close you want to go, is pretty good. That's a very classic combo as well, if you think back to the old days of Epic if you played then. That was a thing you often saw on Titans, and it works pretty well here. Quite versatile, decent number of shots, good against mostly everything. And likewise, I think you can do something similar with the Inferno Gun. So the Inferno Gun being the sort of main feature, showy part of this Warhound. You're going to be trying to get close to really leverage that great weapon. But as you're closing, you've got some of that alternative firepower in the Laser Destructor or the Mega Bolter to use. And if you do want to split fire, the Inferno Gun can fire at a building full of stuff that's close to you, and the other gun can fire at something else that's a bit further away. And I think that's also a pretty viable setup. As with most Titans, though, the Warhound does really benefit from just using 2 of the same gun in a lot of circumstances. Not that there's anything wrong with the mixed loadouts at all, but what you find is when you have 2 weapons with exactly the same range, it means that you get a lot more chances to optimize using the Titan. So 2 Inferno guns, high risk, obviously, but very high reward if you fire it. You're going to kill a lot of infantry, most of them in a building, or even if you catch some tanks off guard, this can be an awful lot of shots. Conversion Beam Dissolutor, similarly, this is the only way I would run Conversion Beams is as a pair, because you obviously want to keep them at that long range. Great anti-structure ability. If you really want to make sure a structure dies, you can fire both guns at it. If you only need to do 1 damage or you want to take a gamble, you can fire 1 and split fire. And it's good at other targets as well. This is the first Warhound I'm going to build, is a double Conversion Beam Dissolutor Warhound. Similarly with the Volkite Eradicator, because you're going to spend a lot of time and effort and brain power trying to get it to the point where it can use its beams, you might as well double up on them, in my opinion. Once you get to where you can use those beams, you hit 2-3 enemy units, it can really do some damage, and I think this is also a really great build. The Vulcan Mega Bolter is a really good weapon. I really like it. Putting 2 of those into anything's going to hurt it. An enemy Titan, even a very big enemy Titan like a War Master, could lose all its shields to one of these in a turn, which would be a really serious blow. And if you're going to go to the trouble of getting yourself to that sort of danger zone of 22 inches, you might as well have 2 of the, high dice gun. And then the last one, I think, is 2 Graviton Eradicators. Although I might be very tempted to mix and match these, I do think if you've got low amounts of Demolisher in your army, or if you want to skimp on demolishing abilities elsewhere in your army, one of these just brings a lot of problems for your opponent. It can stay at range, it can kill 2 structures a turn very easily, almost certainly kill 1, even if it's a very big structure you're playing with. A real worry for your opponent if they're planning to garrison buildings. And that's the end of the show. I hope that has given you a lot of ideas and a lot of information on the weapons for Warhounds. Obviously, great thing about magnetizing is you can try lots of different ones of these in different games. But I think Warhounds are a really good Titan. I think they're a really good option for your armies, and especially at small points values, they're one of the only Titans that you can take as well. I'll see you all again soon for some more Legions Imperialis content. Bye bye.